The stars looked different today. Drake Wilson noticed it first. As commander of the International Space Station, he had spent countless hours gazing at the cosmos through the observation window. Something was moving out there, something that didn't belong. "Houston, we have an unusual object approaching from Sector 7, Drake said, his voice steadied despite his racing heart. The reply came back garbled. Static filled the communication system. Then the station's lights flickered. Drake grabbed his tablet and started recording. 3 silver objects, smooth and oval-shaped, glided past Jupiter. They moved too fast, too precisely. These were not asteroids or natural phenomena. These were ships. On Earth, the first signs of trouble came when satellite communications began failing. Television broadcasts cut out. Internet connections dropped. Cell phones stopped working. Then the night sky lit up with streaks of blue light as more ships entered the atmosphere. In the Pentagon's underground war room, General Thomas Reeves stared at the few remaining functional screens. The president would arrive any minute. How do you tell the leader of the free world that you have no defense against what was coming? "Sir, we've received a transmission," said a young officer, her face pale. It's not in any language we recognize." "Put it on screen," ordered Reeves. The image that appeared showed a creature with pale blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. It spoke, and somehow, the words translated themselves into English. "People of the planet you call Earth, we are the Vorn Collective. We have observed your world and determined it holds resources valuable to us. Your technological development is primitive. Your military capabilities are insignificant. You will surrender your world to us within 3 of your Earth rotations, or we will take it by force. This is not a negotiation." The message played on every working screen across the globe. In Beijing, Moscow, London, and Washington, emergency meetings convened. For the first time in history, all major powers agreed on one thing: humanity would not surrender without a fight. Dr. Lisa Miller was eating dinner when her phone rang. "We need you at the lab immediately," her supervisor said without greeting. "Bring the prototypes." Lisa was one of the world's leading physicists specializing in electromagnetic wave technology. Her recent work had been classified. She grabbed her laptop and the small box containing her latest experiment. As her car sped toward the underground government facility, she saw them in the sky, 3 large ships hovering over the city. They emitted no sound, no heat that she could detect. But her instruments went crazy, detecting energy patterns unlike anything in human science. Colonel James Reynolds watched the same ships from the roof of the military academy. 25 years in special forces had taught him to recognize superior firepower when he saw it. But it had also taught him that superior firepower doesn't always win wars. "Sir," his aide said, handing him a phone. "Joint Chiefs want you on the emergency response team." Reynolds nodded. "Tell them I'm bringing my unconventional warfare playbook." In orbit, the Vorn commander, Lord Krell, observed the primitive planet with 4-eyed contempt. "Report," he ordered his science officer. The humans appeared disorganized and frightened, as expected. Their military forces are mobilizing, but their weapons are crude chemical explosives and basic projectiles. They pose no threat to our shields. And their surrender? No formal response yet. They are still attempting to coordinate between their fragmented governments. Lord Krell made a gesture of dismissal with his upper limb. "Prepare the demonstration. Target their largest military installation but avoid excessive damage. We want the mining colony intact." "Yes, Commander." As the Vorn prepared their first strike, they failed to notice something important. Humans weren't running in panic. They were planning. In labs, bunkers, and command centers around the world, the people of Earth were doing what they did best: adapting, innovating, and preparing to fight back against impossible odds. The Vorn thought victory was certain. They were so wrong. The United Nations building had never been so full. Leaders from every country sat shoulder to shoulder in the emergency session. Armed guards stood at every door. Outside, crowds gathered in silent fear, watching the alien ships that hovered in the distance. President Helen Ward of the United States stood at the podium. Her face showed no fear, though her hands gripped the wooden stand tightly. "We face an enemy unlike any we have known before," she said, "but we will face it together." The doors at the back of the room opened. 4 tall guards with blue skin entered, followed by Lord Krell of the Vorn. His 4 eyes scanned the room with cold interest, like a man looking at insects. "Your time grows short," Lord Krell said. His voice sounded metallic through his translator device. "I have come to show you why resistance is foolish." He raised a hand. A ball of light appeared above him, expanding into a 3-dimensional display. It showed the Earth, beautiful and blue. Then it showed Vorn ships firing weapons. Cities disappeared in flashes of light. Mountains crumbled. Oceans boiled. "This is what we can do," Lord Krell said. "This is what we will do if you resist." Colonel James Reynolds watched from the back of the room. While others stared at the destruction in the display, he noticed something else. The Vorn ambassador blinked his lower eyes rapidly when speaking of certain weapons, a sign of lying. Reynolds had interrogated enough prisoners to recognize tells. "How many ships do you have?" asked the Chinese president. "Enough to reduce your world to ash," replied Lord Krell. Reynolds noted the eye blink again. "Interesting." Dr. Lisa Miller sat in a laboratory 10 floors below the UN building. On her screens, she analyzed the energy readings from the Vorn ships above. Something about their technology seemed familiar. The energy patterns reminded her of her own research. Her phone rang. It was Colonel Reynolds. "Doctor, I think our blue friend upstairs is bluffing about some things," he said quietly. "Can your equipment tell us anything about their actual capabilities?" "I need more data," she replied. "But there's something odd about their energy signatures. It's like they're using quantum crystal technology, similar to what we've been experimenting with, just far more advanced. Can it be disrupted?" "Theoretically, yes. Every system has a frequency that can destabilize it. I need time to find theirs." Upstairs, the world leaders debated in hushed tones. Lord Krell stood impassively, waiting. "We request time to consider your terms," said President Ward finally. "You have the time I gave you. 48 more hours," replied Lord Krell. "Then we begin cleansing operations." After the Vorn left, Colonel Reynolds approached the president. "Ma'am, I don't think they have as many ships as they claim. And Dr. Miller believes their technology might have vulnerabilities we can exploit." "You want to fight them?" she asked, surprised. "I want to win," Reynolds corrected. "And to do that, we need to work together like never before. All countries, all resources." In orbit, Lord Krell returned to his command ship. His second-in-command awaited his report. "The humans are frightened, as expected," Lord Krell said. "They will surrender. And if they don't, then we will use the 3 ships we have to maximum effect. The collective cannot send reinforcements for at least 14 cycles. We must secure this planet before then." On Earth, an emergency meeting of scientists, military leaders, and engineers convened. Dr. Miller presented her findings. "Their shields operate on a quantum frequency that might be vulnerable to specific radio waves," she explained. "If we can build a device to generate those waves at high power." "How long?" asked Colonel Reynolds. "With global cooperation, maybe 48 hours, she answered. "Just enough time." The next day, as the Vorn watched from orbit, expecting to see signs of surrender, they instead saw something confusing. Humans were moving resources and people around in patterns that made no sense to Vorn military doctrine. "What are they doing?" asked Lord Krell. "Unknown," replied his science officer. "But it appears uncoordinated and inefficient." Lord Krell's 4 eyes narrowed. "Continue monitoring." What the Vorn couldn't understand was that humans were preparing for a kind of war the aliens had never fought before, one where the weaker side refused to play by the rules of the stronger. The underground bunker buzzed with activity. Scientists from 30 different countries worked side by side. Their normal rivalries were forgotten. 6 hours had passed since Dr. Miller had called them together. The Vorn ships use quantum crystalline technology, she explained, pointing to the 3D model floating above the table. It's like our early prototypes, but thousands of times more advanced. A man with thick glasses raised his hand. Dr. Brown from MIT. I've analyzed the radiation patterns from their ships. They emit a specific frequency when changing power modes. Dr. Miller nodded excitedly. Exactly. And every system like this has a resonance point. If we hit that point with the right frequency, we could disrupt their shields, finished a woman with short gray hair. Dr. Wong, Beijing Institute. We've been working on similar technology for 5 years. Colonel Reynolds watched from the doorway. He wasn't a scientist, but he understood opportunity when he saw it. How long to build a device that can generate these disruptive frequencies? He asked. Dr. Miller looked at her colleagues. With global resources, 24 hours for a prototype, but we'll need to test it. You'll have your test, Reynolds promised. The Vorn are planning something for tomorrow. I can feel it. Above Earth, Lord Krell reviewed the planet's defenses with growing confidence. Their scans showed primitive missile systems, basic aircraft, and ground forces with simple ballistic weapons. The humans continue to move resources, reported his second-in-command. But they show no signs of surrender preparations. Curious, said Lord Krell. Scan their largest research facilities. Perhaps they believe they can develop a defense. The scan results puzzled him. The large research centers were nearly empty. Where had all the scientists gone? They're hiding something, Lord Krell decided. Prepare a small strike force. Target their largest military installation as planned. Let's see how they respond. Back on Earth, Reynolds entered the President's emergency office. Madam President, our scientists think they found a weakness in Vorn technology. President Ward looked up from her stack of reports. Hope flickered in her tired eyes. How certain are they? Not certain enough, Reynolds admitted. But it's the best chance we have. We need to avoid direct confrontation until the device is ready. The Vorn want an answer in 18 hours, she reminded him. Then we need to stall, Reynolds said. And we need to be ready when they make their first move. The president picked up a secure phone. Get me the Chinese president and the Russian president. Then the EU, India, and Japan. It's time for the biggest joint military operation in human history. Within hours, military forces around the world began executing the same unusual strategy. Major bases were evacuated. Equipment was dispersed to thousands of small locations. Planes were hidden in mountain hangars. Ships moved out to uncommon positions. Lord Krell watched this activity with growing concern. What are they doing? He demanded. This violates all standard defensive protocols. His military advisor seemed equally confused. They appear to be scattering their forces, making themselves more vulnerable, not less. Perhaps they've accepted defeat and are trying to preserve some of their military assets, suggested another officer. Lord Krell wasn't convinced. In his 400 cycles of military service, he had conquered 6 worlds. None had behaved like this. Launch the demonstration strike. Target their Pentagon facility. The weapons officer hesitated. Commander, it appears mostly empty now. Lord Krell's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. What? Scan again. The scan confirmed it. The building that had been full of human military personnel hours ago now showed only minimal life signs. Underneath a mountain 300 miles away, the real Pentagon operations continued. General Reeves watched as radar detected Vorn ships moving into attack position. They're taking the bait, he said quietly. In Dr. Miller's lab, the prototype disruptor was nearly complete. Scientists worked in shifts, soldering components, and testing circuits. The device looked simple, just a modified radio transmitter connected to power amplifiers. But its effect, if it worked, would be anything but simple. We need more time. Dr. Miller told Colonel Reynolds over the phone. "We may not have it," he replied, watching satellite feeds of the approaching Vorn ships. "They're making their move." Dr. Miller looked at her tired team, then at the half-finished device. "Tell everyone to work faster," she said. "The entire planet depends on it." The deadline passed without Earth's surrender. Lord Krell stood on the bridge of his command ship, all four eyes fixed on the view screen showing the blue planet below. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Target their Washington military center first." Bright energy beams shot down from the Vorn ship. The Pentagon building exploded in a cloud of dust and fire. Lord Krell expected panic, chaos, desperate counterattacks. None came. "Scan for military response," he commanded. "Nothing, Commander," replied his weapons officer, confusion in his voice. "No missile launches, no aircraft scrambling." Their communications remained calm and organized. Lord Krell's skin darkened with anger. "Target their other military bases. New York, Moscow, Beijing." More beams struck Earth. More empty buildings exploded. "Still no counterattack," reported the weapons officer. "Where are their forces?" Lord Krell demanded. In a small farm building in Kansas, Colonel Reynolds watched the Vorn attack on his tablet. Around him, 30 soldiers waited silently. Similar groups were hidden in thousands of locations across the globe. "They're following the exact pattern we predicted," Reynolds said into his secure radio. "They have no idea they're hitting empty targets." "The disruptor prototype is ready," Dr. Miller's voice replied. "But it's untested. Range is limited to 5 miles. That's why we're going to bring them to us," Reynolds said. "Commence Operation Flypaper." Across the world, small human forces revealed themselves briefly before disappearing again. A tank column would appear on a road, fire a few ineffective shots toward the sky, then vanish into a tunnel. Fighter jets would launch, make a pass near a Vorn ship, then dive into mountain hangars. The Vorn, confused by these tactics, began sending smaller scout ships to chase these elusive targets. "They're not fighting properly," Lord Krell complained to his advisors. "They show themselves, then retreat before we can destroy them." "Perhaps they are cowards," suggested one officer. "No," Lord Krell said slowly. "They're drawing us in, wanting us to commit our forces in small groups." He turned to his second-in-command. "Recall all scout ships. We will land troops instead." The first Vorn ground forces landed near what remained of the Pentagon. 500 blue-skinned soldiers with advanced energy weapons spread out in perfect formation. They encountered no resistance as they moved toward the ruins. Hidden in the basement of a nearby building, a young lieutenant named Mike Jones watched them through a special scope. He spoke quietly into his radio. "They're in position. All units hold." The Vorn soldiers advanced with confidence. Their sensors detected no human forces nearby. Suddenly, their commander stopped, holding up one four-fingered hand. "Something is wrong," he said. "This is too easy." In Dr. Miller's mobile lab, 10 miles away, she made the final adjustments to the disruptor device. It looked like a small satellite dish connected to a generator. "Power to full," she ordered. "Target the Vorn ground forces first." The scientist next to her pushed a button. The device hummed loudly. Nothing seemed to happen for several seconds. Near the Pentagon ruins, the Vorn soldiers suddenly clutched at their helmets. Their weapons flickered and died. Their communication systems filled with static. "Now," shouted Lieutenant Jones into his radio. From every building, window, and hidden position around the area, human soldiers appeared. They fired conventional weapons at the confused aliens. Without their energy shields and weapons, the Vorn were vulnerable. Lord Krell watched in shock as the signals from his ground forces went dark. "What happened?" he demanded. "Unknown interference," reported his science officer. "Their equipment simply stopped working." "Impossible," Lord Krell said. "Our technology is beyond their comprehension." Yet the evidence was clear on his screens. Somehow, the humans had disabled Vorn technology. His ground forces were being decimated. "Send in the second wave," he ordered. "Full combat drop." Across Earth, similar scenes played out. Small groups of Vorn forces found themselves suddenly vulnerable, their advanced technology failing when they needed it most. Human forces, using simple projectile weapons and guerrilla tactics, emerged from hiding to strike at the confused aliens. In her lab, Dr. Miller looked at her readings with excitement. "It works," she told Reynolds over the radio. "But we need to make it stronger, with greater range. We need to hit their ships in orbit." "How long?" Reynolds asked. 3 days, maybe 4, to build enough disruptors for global coverage." Reynolds watched as human soldiers rounded up captured Vorn troops. "Good work, Doctor," he said. "Earth just won its first battle." In orbit, Lord Krell came to a disturbing realization. This would not be the simple conquest he had promised the collective. Somehow, these primitive humans had found a way to fight back. He would need those reinforcements after all. 3 days passed. The Vorn had landed their forces in 12 major cities. They expected to find scared humans hiding in their homes. Instead, they found empty streets. The people had evacuated days before, following emergency plans that governments had quickly created. Lord Krell paced the bridge of his command ship, his normally blue skin now a dark purple with rage. "How can they keep evading us?" he demanded. "They're primitives." His second-in-command spoke carefully. "Commander, we've lost contact with 3 more ground units. The humans are using our own technology against us." This was true. After each battle, human soldiers collected Vorn weapons and equipment. Dr. Miller and her team worked day and night to understand and adapt the alien technology. In an underground base beneath the Rocky Mountains, Dr. Miller connected wires to a captured Vorn energy rifle. Next to her stood Colonel Reynolds, watching with interest. "Their weapons use the same quantum crystalline power source as their ships," she explained. "We've modified it to work with our disruptor frequency." She aimed the weapon at a test target and pulled the trigger. Instead of firing an energy beam, it sent out a pulse of invisible waves. The metal target vibrated, then cracked in half. "Impressive," said Reynolds. "How many can we make?" "With the factories running at full capacity, 1,000 by tomorrow. Each one can disable Vorn technology within 50 feet. Reynolds smiled. Time to take the fight to them. Across the world, human forces prepared for a coordinated counterattack. The plan was simple but risky. Small teams equipped with modified Vorn technology would target alien strongholds simultaneously. In London, Captain Bill Taylor led his team through the empty subway tunnels. Above them, Vorn patrols marched through the abandoned streets. Each soldier carried a backpack with a small disruptor device. "Remember," Taylor told his team, "once we activate the disruptors, we have 10 minutes before their ships can adapt to the frequency." They positioned themselves beneath key points where Vorn forces had gathered. At exactly 3:00 p.m. Greenwich time, they activated their devices. All across the globe, the same scene played out. Vorn soldiers suddenly found their weapons and shields failing. Human forces emerged from hiding places, using conventional weapons, and captured Vorn technology against the confused aliens. In New York, Moscow, Beijing, London, and 8 other cities, the Vorn faced unexpected defeat. Their perfect formations broke apart. Their carefully planned strategies became useless. For the first time, they experienced something they were not prepared for: the chaos of real battle. Lord Krell received the reports with growing horror. Half his ground forces were now captured or destroyed. The humans were adapting to Vorn technology faster than should have been possible. "We need the reinforcements," he told his officers. "Send the distress signal to the collective." "Sir," his communications officer said hesitantly, "our long-range transmitters are experiencing interference. The humans have found a way to jam our signals." This was Dr. Miller's latest achievement. Her team had modified the disruptor technology to target the specific frequencies used by Vorn communication systems. Lord Krell made a difficult decision. "Prepare for orbital bombardment. If we cannot take their cities, we will destroy them." His weapons officer looked shocked. But Commander, the Collective wants this planet intact for mining. The Collective does not understand what we face here, Lord Krell replied. These humans are more dangerous than any species we have encountered. We must crush them now, or risk losing everything. In the Rocky Mountain base, Reynolds received the warning from their monitoring systems. The Vorn ships are changing position. He told President Ward over the secure video link. They're preparing for a major attack from orbit. The president's face showed no fear. Is the big disruptor ready? Reynolds looked at Dr. Miller, who nodded. Yes, Madam President, but we only have one, and it's untested at this range. If it fails, then we've lost anyway, the president finished. Do it. On the highest peak of the mountain, a larger version of Dr. Miller's disruptor device pointed toward the sky. It had taken the combined resources of 20 countries to build it in just 3 days. Dr. Miller checked the calculations one last time, then pressed the activation button. May this work, she whispered, or Earth falls today. A pulse of invisible energy shot upward toward the Vorn fleet. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the lights on the alien ships began to flicker and die. Lord Krell clung to his command chair as alarms blared throughout the ship. The lights flickered, then switched to emergency power. Around him, his crew frantically worked at their stations. Report, he shouted. All systems failing, his engineer replied, voice tight with panic. Shields down, weapons offline, life support operating on backup power only. Through the view screen, Krell could see the other Vorn ships drifting, their engines dark. The impossible had happened. Somehow, the humans had disabled the most advanced fleet in the Vorn Collective. Colonel Reynolds watched the same scene from the control room of the mountain base. Cheers erupted around him as the screen showed the Vorn fleet going dark. It worked, Dr. Miller said, her voice filled with wonder. It actually worked. Reynolds picked up a secure phone. Madam President, the Vorn fleet is disabled, requesting permission to launch Operation Capture. President Ward's voice came through clearly. Permission granted, Colonel. Bring us a command ship. Within hours, modified military shuttles launched from hidden bases around the world. These were ordinary human aircraft that Dr. Miller's team had enhanced with salvaged Vorn technology. They surrounded the drifting alien ships, their pilots wearing special suits designed to protect them from the effects of the disruptor field. Lord Krell watched helplessly as the human vessels approached his command ship. His crew looked to him for orders, but what could he say? Their weapons were useless. Their shields were down. For the first time in his long military career, Lord Krell faced defeat. Prepare for boarding, he told his crew. Do not resist. I will not lose more Vorn lives today. Captain Mark Johnson led the boarding team onto the Vorn command ship. Each human soldier carried both conventional weapons and modified Vorn technology. They moved through the alien corridors with practiced precision, securing each section as they advanced toward the bridge. When they reached the bridge, Lord Krell was waiting. The tall blue alien stood with dignity, his 4 eyes regarding the humans with new respect. You have defeated us, he said simply. How did you do it? Captain Johnson didn't answer. His orders were clear. Secure the ship and its commander with minimal communication. Back on Earth, Dr. Miller and her team began the difficult task of understanding the Vorn ship's systems. With each passing hour, they made new discoveries, unlocking secrets of technology centuries beyond human development. Their navigation system contains data on the entire Vorn Collective, Dr. Miller told Colonel Reynolds. Hundreds of star systems, dozens of conquered worlds. And look at this. She pointed to a star map showing the position of Vorn reinforcements. They're still 2 weeks away. And now we have their communication codes. Reynolds smiled grimly. Can we send a message that they'll believe comes from Krell? Already working on it, Dr. Miller replied. In a secure facility beneath the White House, President Ward met with Lord Krell. The Vorn commander sat stiffly in a chair designed for human proportions, his 4 eyes constantly scanning the room. "Your species has surprised us," Lord Krell admitted. "No world has ever resisted the collective successfully." "We're full of surprises," President Ward replied. "But now we need to talk about the future. Your reinforcements are coming. We can fight them too, or we can find another solution." Lord Krell's upper eyes narrowed. What solution could there be? The collective does not negotiate with conquered worlds. "But we're not conquered, are we?" President Ward said. "And soon, other worlds will know that the Vorn can be defeated." For the first time, uncertainty showed in Lord Krell's expression. Meanwhile, Colonel Reynolds and a special team boarded the repaired Vorn scout ship. Using the knowledge gained from studying the alien vessels, they had restored its systems and learned to operate its controls. "This is our one chance," Reynolds told his team as they prepared for launch. "We're going to show the galaxy that the Vorn aren't invincible." The small ship rose from Earth, its engines glowing with energy patterns humans had never created before. It accelerated toward the edges of the solar system, carrying a message that would change the balance of power among the stars. On board, Reynolds looked at the unfamiliar controls and the stars beyond the viewscreen. Humanity was about to take its first step into a much larger universe, and they were doing it in a stolen Vorn ship, using alien technology that humans had mastered in less than a week. The Vorn had thought Earth would be an easy conquest. They had been so very wrong. 2 weeks passed. Earth prepared for the arrival of Vorn reinforcements. Cities remained evacuated. Military forces stayed hidden in their scattered positions, but there was a new feeling in the air. Hope. Colonel Reynolds' mission had succeeded beyond all expectations. Using the captured Vorn ship, his team had traveled to 3 worlds previously conquered by the collective. On each planet, they had broadcast proof that the mighty Vorn could be defeated. They shared the frequency that disabled Vorn technology. They showed images of Lord Krell in human custody. Now Reynolds stood in the United Nations building beside Dr. Miller, watching as a new Vorn ship entered Earth orbit. This one was larger than the previous vessels, with golden markings on its hull. "They're hailing us," said a communications officer. President Ward nodded. "Put them on screen." The image that appeared showed an elderly Vorn with pale gray-blue skin. Unlike Lord Krell's military uniform, this Vorn wore elaborate robes with complex patterns. "I am High Counselor Mrev of the Vorn Collective," the alien said. "I come to discuss the situation." President Ward stepped forward. "We are prepared to defend ourselves again if necessary." High Counselor Mrev made a gesture with his upper limbs that might have been conciliatory. "That will not be necessary. Your species has done something no other has accomplished in 800 cycles. You have forced the collective to reconsider its approach." In a holding cell beneath the UN building, Lord Krell watched the transmission with his 4 eyes wide in shock. A High Counselor himself had come to this primitive world. Such an event was unprecedented. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Reynolds and Dr. Miller attended every session, providing technical details when needed. By the end, Earth had achieved something remarkable: recognition as a sovereign power by the Vorn Collective. "We will withdraw all forces from your system," High Counselor Mrev announced in the final session, "in exchange for the return of our personnel and ships." "And what about the other worlds you've conquered?" asked President Ward. Mrev's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in what humans now recognized as discomfort. "That is an internal matter for the collective." Reynolds stepped forward. "It's not internal anymore. We've shared your weakness with 3 other worlds already. How long before all your conquered planets know how to defeat your technology?" For the first time, the High Counselor showed emotion resembling fear. "You've done what?" Dr. Miller smiled slightly. "Your quantum crystalline technology is impressive, but it has a fundamental flaw. We've documented it and shared it with others. Information wants to be free." The final agreement was more comprehensive than anyone had dared hope. The Vorn would grant independence to any world that requested it. They would establish diplomatic relations with Earth. They would share certain technologies in exchange for the humans keeping the resonance frequency weakness secret from any new species. On the day the Vorn fleet departed, crowds gathered in cities around the world to watch the ships rise into the sky. People cheered and waved flags of all nations side by side. In the White House Rose Garden, President Ward presented medals to Colonel Reynolds and Dr. Miller. "You've given humanity more than just victory," she said. "You've given us unity. For the first time in our history, all nations work together toward a single goal. We must not lose that spirit as we move forward." Reynolds accepted the medal with a nod. "What happens now?" "We have Vorn technology, knowledge of other worlds. Everything changes." "Everything already has changed," Dr. Miller replied. "We're not alone anymore, and we've proven we can stand with the best of them." Later that evening, Reynolds found Dr. Miller in her lab, already working on a new project. "Don't you ever rest?" he asked with a smile. She looked up from a disassembled piece of Vorn technology. "How can I? We have so much to learn, so much to create. The Vorn may have been thousands of years ahead of us, but we caught up in days when we had to." "That's what they didn't understand about humans," Reynolds said, sitting beside her. "We're at our best when things are at their worst." Outside the lab window, the stars shined in the night sky. The same stars that had always been there, but now they seemed closer somehow, more accessible. Somewhere out there were other worlds, other species. Some would be friends, some might be enemies, but none would make the same mistake as the Vorn. None would think they could defeat Earth easily. The word was spreading across the galaxy. The humans of Earth were not to be underestimated. They were creative, adaptable, and fiercely determined. They could take technology centuries beyond their own and master it in days. They could unite against a common threat with remarkable speed. As Reynolds looked at the stars, he wondered what adventures waited for humanity among them. Whatever challenges came next, he was certain of one thing: Earth would be ready.